Hello everyone, just a quick word from your friendly editor/husband. For all of you who listen to So I'm Watching This Show and own an Android device, do me a favor. Go to the Google Play Store and download the Podcast Republic app. It's a fantastic app that allows you to get all of your favorite podcasts directly on your Android devices. I use the app and love it. I can search for the podcasts I want to listen to, select them as favorites, and have them all just a click away. Make sure you set So I'm Watching the Show as a favorite so you don't miss any new episodes. Again, the app is Podcast Republic, available on your Android device. Thanks!
Do you ever smell your microphone?
No.
Really? I do it all
No.
the time.
Why?
It smells kind of like electronics.
Oh.
Are you doing it now?
Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't really smell like anything to me.
Yeah, mine smells like electronics and kind of like the foam that used to be around it.
Oh. Yeah. That's enough.
This episode is going to be a mess.
Well, you
It's gonna
made
be
me get drunk.
tacky mess. I did. How fun are you feeling?
Funner than when I'm sober, that's for sure.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, God, that was awful.
What the hell?
It was like bourbon and mashed potatoes.
Man, that's not the worst combination.
It was pretty bad. Come over here and smell.
No, thanks. I'm not going to smell your microphone.
Is this thing on? So, hello everybody, I'm Will.
And I'm Kristen.
And this is why I'm watching this show. On today's episode, we are going to kick off the month of October with the movie Crimson Peak,
Woo-woo!
which we love, correct?
Love Crimson Peak. Yeah,
Okay.
I love Crimson Peak. This is,
Love
I mean,
wings.
oh, man. Love it.
As mentioned, if it stays in the episode, you are a little bit toasty.
I'm a little toasty on some bourbon. Bourbon on the rocks.
I was trying to get there. Basically, cut to the chase. We enjoy this movie, but as I was watching it, I was sort of like, I honestly don't know what all we're going to say. It's pretty straightforward. And so much so that I even pulled up the Rotten Tomatoes, and it's 73%, so it's fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And it says, Crimson Peak offers an engaging, albeit slight, diversion driven by a delightfully creepy atmosphere and director Guillermo del Toro's brilliant knack for unforgettable visuals. And that's ultimately where I was, is I think it's pretty light.
I mean, I think there are some deeper themes to the movie. I will say it is, I guess, mostly like a confection, but I don't know. I just love it. This is like the rare sort of dark movie that I could put on at any time and be satisfied.
Really?
Oh yeah, totally. Like I just was, when I told you I was watching it, it was because I knew we were doing it soon and I was in the mood.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I could definitely watch Crimson Peak tonight.
I was in the mood, too. To bring it round, to actually explain the thing. You came home today, and I was watching some behind-the-scenes stuff. And I was like, you need to get drunk. I was like, because I don't know what we're going to say about this movie. I was like, and you're a lot chattier when you've been drinking.
Yeah.
And so you were like, I'm on it. I think you were actually eating potato salad as I said that.
I was eating potato salad out of the container.
Out of the container in the refrigerator.
I was hungry when I got home, so I stopped eating potato salad and started mainlining bourbon so that I could be more fun for you on the podcast.
You also keep saying that. You literally said to Will, you were like, Will's making me get drunk because I'm more fun that way. And I was like, I said you talked more. I said nothing about you being more fun.
Well, I'm all funned up now.
In a general sense, they frequently go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand. I get it. You don't like me when I'm sober. It's fine.
Isn't that
It's not an Evanescence song.
song?
The Evanescence song is called You Only Call Me When You're Sober.
Do you remember that one time? It was back in MySpace days when I messaged Jen back to back the lyrics to You Only Call Me When You're Sober and Paris Hilton's Star is Blind because I wanted her to listen to both of them. and she got confused and thought that you never call me when you're sober was the Paris Hilton song. And she was like, wow. She was like, I'm like really surprised. And I was like, it's good, right? And we went back and forth for a little while before I was like, what do you think we're talking about?
Wait a minute.
She's like, I don't know that I'd call it reggae. And I'm like, well, it's not like authentic reggae.
It is like calypso pop, though.
So, yeah. Anyways. So, Crimson Peak. It is a Guillermo del Toro movie. Let me go ahead and pull up the thing since I'm riffing.
This is not necessarily the movie you want to riff on.
Why not? I mean,
I don't know.
Just chalk it all up to like illusion or metaphor or something.
Well, I mean, there is a lot of illusion and metaphor, but I feel like there's a lot going on in this movie. I agree with you that it's a very basic story, and it's a very like Jane Eyre kind of story, Wuthering Heights kind of story, but I feel like there's more. Maybe I'm just reacting to the performances, which I think are all very, very, very good. But I don't know. This movie to me is very deep and lush.
Well, yeah, and we're going to get into it.
Okay.
So I was just going to say that Crimson Peak is a 2015 American Gothic romance film because it was advertised as a horror film, and it is not a horror film, and everybody thinks that did the movie a disservice.
I agree with that. The advertising for this movie, whichever Universal or whoever put this out, did it dirty. Because it was billed as a horror movie, and it is not that. It's like sort of suspenseful and sort of dark, and there are quote-unquote ghosts, but this is a Gothic romance, and that is exactly what it is, and that's how it should have been billed, and it was not.
Well, there's a line in the beginning of the movie that says a ghost story, and she said, "Oh, it's not. It's more of a story with ghosts." With ghosts, in it.
Exactly.
So.
This is a romance, like a Rose for Emily style romance.
Well, Gothic romance is a genre that took off around the late 18th century, I believe, and it was sort of a combination of horror and fairy tale. And
yeah, like Mary Shelley and, like I already said, whichever Bronte wrote Jane Eyre, Charlotte, I think. That, I mean, and Wuthering Heights, to be totally honest, so both Bronte sisters, well, 2 of the 3 Bronte sisters, but I feel like, I don't know, this is one of those things that feels like it's just for me. Like when you and I make jokes about starting a pornography company that does like very detailed, like
merchant ivory porn.
Like Rococo style porn.
Antony and Cleopatra.
Yeah, and it's like, this movie is like, if you were to look inside my brain and say like, what is the peak thing that you want to see, this movie would spill out for you. And I feel like that it obviously isn't the case for most people because this movie didn't do great, like money-wise. But for me, it's such a visceral thing that I love so much that I don't understand why other people don't respond to it, where I'm like, I feel like Stefan, where I'm like, it's got everything you could want. It's got ghosts.
Slurpees.
Incest.
Goblins.
Creepy red mud.
Ghouls.
Charlie Hunnam.
My son.
And I just feel like nobody else wants all of those things in the same thing.
I never did finish setting up the movie.
Sorry. You got me drunk.
I was going to say I did this. I reap what I sow. The film stars Mia Wasikowska, Tom Hiddleston, Jessica Chastain, Charlie Hunnam, and Jim Beaver. And the story is set in Victorian-era England and follows an aspiring author who travels to a remote Gothic mansion in the English hills with her fiancé and his sister. There, she must decipher the mystery behind the ghostly visions that haunt her new home. The thing for me with this movie, because I enjoy it, I thoroughly love it, although I disagree, it's not something that I could just put on any old time. I've probably seen it 5 times. And
for when it was on HBO, I watched it every time it was on.
For me, this is more of like an art piece or like an experiment. Like I love it. It's a little bit on par, or it's actually very much on par with Bram Stoker's Dracula, in that I think Bram Stoker's Dracula succeeds a little bit more because I think that there's more to it. There's more spectacle. There's more to this. Like you have a larger cast of characters.
Source material.
Yeah. And this is partially an exercise in like classical cinema because it very much feels like an old movie, up to including like the weird I forgot what they're called, the like cuts between scenes where it's called something.
Like a fade?
Yeah, the fades or the wipes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the sex earlier, and that's actually one of the things that it's like, I think it could have dealt with a little bit more sex.
I mean,
I think it could use a little bit more.
Sure. I mean, if we were starting our porn company right now,
Not
we
porn.
would absolutely do a version of this.
That word down. I just think there should have been another scene, and or Thomas and Lucille's scene should have been more.
Okay, fair. Also, to just bring that around, we would make this porn version and it would still be called Crimson Peak somehow. You can cut that. I thought it was funny.
Well, I mean,
this is what happens when you get me drunk. Regardless of that, I tend to agree with you a little bit. If I would agree with you more if it weren't explicitly stated in the movie why there weren't more sex.
Why was that?
Well, there wasn't more sex between Thomas and Edith because he wasn't supposed to, and she was quote unquote mourning.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you that we could have had another scene between Thomas and Lucille, but I feel like you find out about their incest at the moment you're supposed to. And so if anything had happened sooner, it would have played Edith for a fool in a way that is more aggressive than what comes around.
Sure. You've shown your work. I guess because it's fairly restrained with the violence. It's obviously scary and it's gory in the sense that we have these like grotesque, specters like coming out of the corners.
Yeah.
But like it mostly saves the violence for the end, and then there's a lot of it. So I kind of wish that it was a similar thing with the sex, where maybe their one sex scene, I don't know, I wanted them swinging from the banister. I don't quite.
Because I feel like we're definitely at odds with the sex thing, because I think that their sex scene in the train depot is so good.
It works. I mean, this isn't a hill I'm trying to die on, or a peak for that matter. I'm just saying that, like,
this is not a crimson peak I'm willing to die on. My deal with that is I especially like it because for most of it, Edith is in control of the scene, and like Thomas lets her be in control because I think it might be what he's used to with Lucille.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very fraught.
I mean, she's fully clothed, like, through the scene. Yeah.
She's fully clothed, and we get his ass and everything, and his, like, shirt is undone and everything, and I just feel like it's a very... Until you've seen it a handful of times, you don't get the, like, Freudian levels that it goes to, and then once you do, you're like, oh man, is he messed up for, like, so many years.
But that's another point where it's like, that's why my praise for this movie is a little bit tempered, but it's like, I feel like it's a plot and it's a twist that you really see coming from a mile away.
Yeah, but we've argued before that is not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
The twists aren't necessarily to make you so shocked, that it like pulls you out of the movie. The twists are sometimes you're supposed to see it coming because it's the journey that gets you there. It's the path that the movie takes to get you to the twist that's interesting.
And it's the stuff like that I think makes it feel like an older movie. Because a lot of times when you're watching these older movies, like some of the Hitchcock or even Rebecca and stuff, it's like a modern audience catches wise to a lot of it because we know. And so that goes back to my point where I'm like, part of it is like an experiment or like an art piece for me, where it's like, I'm glad that it exists just for the sake of existing. And I wish we didn't live in a society where art had to be profitable in order to be deemed valuable. And
I 100% agree with that, because while this movie was not exceptionally profitable, I think this movie's a masterpiece.
In spite of some
visually.
In spite of some of the criticism I give it, I just think it's a little bit thin. I think it's like, I agree with the Rotten Tomatoes that it's a slight story, but that doesn't mean that I don't think that it's not a valuable entry in the genre and in Guillermo del Toro's canon, because he's kind of done several, like he's done, I don't know what I would qualify Pan's Labyrinth, but he's done a comic book movie, he's done a fairy tale, he's done horror, and then this is his like romance, like gothic romance. And so I like that he has these sort of different genres that he's looking through with his lens. And I kind of think that this movie, it to some extent exists not as its own individual thing, but to be part of a larger whole of his oeuvre, his work.
Yeah, well, yes, and I also would go back to your Hitchcock point, which is that some of those are not very twisty or surprising to modern audiences, and I would argue that this is similar to the books that it is clearly referencing, where if I were alive when the Brontes were alive, Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights would have been extremely twisty and surprising to me. And so it's like, but I've read both of those and seen multiple versions of, media based off of them. And so it's not twisty and surprising anymore to me. But I think that doesn't render it any less valid.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fine.
As a work of art.
Yeah.
And I think this is such a competent work of art that I mean, everything about it, and we were watching the special features, like you said, when I came home, everything about this was so meticulously thought out that I can't imagine it existing any other way, which is especially hilarious because at one point, Benedict Cumberbatch and Emma Stone were on the project, attached to the project.
I could see that.
I don't know. To me, it does not work the same.
Well, Emma feels American in a way that Mia doesn't quite pull off.
That's fair. That part's fair. But my thing is, this again feels like that thing that I talk about sometimes where it really feels like the movie gods looked down and were like, those two aren't going to be right for this movie. Better put these two in instead.
Mm-hmm.
And I really just feel like there's just something about the two of them, the chemistry that they have, the story of Thomas and Edith that works so well with her as this waify girl.
You think that?
Oh, I for sure think that.
Okay.
As much as I think I would have liked Benedict Cumberbatch's voice, there's something more generally appealing about Tom Hiddleston, and there's something less confident and commanding about Mia Wasikowska. And I think that suits the character so much better than Emma Stone. And because Emma Stone is so brassy, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Emma Stone's a broad. Oh, but Mia Wasikowska is a waif.
I think Emma could do wavy, but
I think she could pull off wafy, but it's nothing compared to the way that Mia Wasikowska just is wafy.
Mm-hmm. It's I'm glad. I was going to ask you that question: how straight up you bought into, or you took all of this stuff? Because I think that their chemistry is fine. It doesn't move mountains for me. And
it does for me
to an extent. I think Jessica Chastain runs circles around them. I think this is her movie.
Obviously.
Well,
obviously.
Literally and metaphorically.
Yeah, literally and metaphorically, of course. Jessica Chastain is always the best one in the room. And I was reading the trivia, and she was doing this at the same time she was doing A Most Violent Year, where she had to play a gangster's wife in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
She's a fucking beast at acting. And I think that she gets... I mean, obviously people love her and she's been nominated for a couple of Oscars, but I think she gets lost in the conversation.
Don't like her. Yeah, people don't like her.
She gets lost in the conversation way more than she deserves to be. And she obviously, yes, does run circles around both of them. But I also think that is partially just because of the character that Lucille is, where Thomas is submissive to Lucille and then Edith is submissive to Thomas, and then
subsequently
in turn, subsequently submissive to Lucille. So it's she is the top dog in this story as soon as she, spoiler alert, kills Jim Beaver. That's
because the movie does lead you to believe it was Thomas.
Yes. Yeah. But it was definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Thomas could never, you know what I mean?
This is a repeating theme for us that I've noticed over the time we've been working on this podcast, is that there are some movies that in many ways I think they exist for the people who need them. Yes. And this movie, I feel like, is for the 12-year-old spooky girls and gays who are a little bit ahead of their time and their peers, and they need some form of proper sustenance. And there's a lot of adult movies and R-rated movies that it's sure, they're inappropriate, there's violence, there's sex, there's language, what have you. But I'm this is for young people who are into this sort of thing. Could you imagine having this movie at 13?
I think I would be a slightly different person. Not like a hugely different person, but I think I'd be a slightly different person because I totally agree with you. This movie speaks to me on a level that at the time I thought Titanic and Pearl Harbor were speaking to me, but they weren't speaking to me.
That's what was available
the 100. To you. That's what it was available to me, but they weren't speaking to me at the exact right place.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were speaking to like 85% of me, but there's a tragedy and a sadness and a depth and a darkness in Crimson Peak that speaks to me more than just the like slight melancholy of Titanic and Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about Crimson Peak that's so much more romantic to me than other epics that have come before it.
And in a way that I think is accessible to young people who are a little bit ahead of their,
Yes. Like kids who are in 6th grade reading at a 12th grade reading level.
6 is on the younger side, but yeah.
That's what this movie's for.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kids that this movie's for. And I feel like, well, because that's the thing. I mean, I had read so many books and like romantic books and some classic romances and stuff, but like when I remember reading Wuthering Heights for the first time, and I was like, oh damn, this is like a thing I didn't know was something that I wanted and needed. And this movie reminds me so much of that feeling the first time I read Wuthering Heights when I was like 17.
That's what we should have paired this with, is we should have done this with the Jane Eyre that Mia is in with
I'm willing to stop now and do that because I fucking love that movie.
I've actually never seen it.
Oh my god, it's so good. I'm literally willing to stop now and pair it with this.
We'll add it to the I mean, do you want?
You want to do like dark romance for February this year?
I was going to say we could, well, I don't know. I still like the fantasy February, but we could they're bedfellows.
Yeah, we could do both. It's fine.
I was going to say we could finally do them with either Great Expectations or that, the Great Expectations with Helena Bonham Carter.
Yeah, that's fine. Honestly, I could finally make you watch Pride and Prejudice too. It's not dark, but it's like a similar. I mean, it's a Regency era similar vibe.
Well, yeah. So I think we'll get to that. I think we'll be okay. My plan worked. I knew that if you got a little bit boozed up, you would be chattier. So I was like, I knew we could get to a solid 30 minutes with this. But yeah, I think it's just the right amount of, I mean, in spite of the fact that I do think it could have used a little bit more. I mean, maybe even just more of like a better shot of him naked, kind of like the shot of Ryan Phillippe in Cruel Intentions.
Sure, I mean...
That's sort of what I mean with that whole thing in the beginning.
I'm nothing if not thirsting for a shot of Tom Hiddleston's dick at all times.
Well, we're not going to get that.
No, of course not.
We almost did in that one, but...
If we haven't already, we're not going to. He's definitely too famous now, and I don't think Disney would allow it.
Why would Disney have any say over that?
Because he's Loki.
That doesn't matter.
I mean, it doesn't not matter.
I don't think Disney's controlling his other movies.
You don't know. On that vein, though, I did love the fact that he was the one who suggested that he be more naked than Mia Wasikowska.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, in movies like this, in the time period it depicts, it's always the woman who's like nakeder, and she is fully clothed and like way more in control of the whole scene.
She's really on top of him. It's like,
yeah,
cowgirl.
I like it a lot.
So I mentioned earlier that this was Jessica Chastain's movie, or that she was the star of this movie, and that is actually incorrect because the star of this movie is The House.
Oh, absolutely. I thought you were going to say something. I thought you were going to make a dick joke about, or like a rude joke about Charlie Hunnam.
No. I mean, he's fine.
His terrible American accent and his stupid name, which is...
What was his name?
Isn't it like Michael McMichaels or something?
I don't know.
Something totally absurd.
That is another thing for me, because I know how hard up you are for Tom Hiddleston. We've already talked about it for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But for me, there's no reality where I'm not choosing Charlie Hunnam.
Ew!
How? How are you saying ew?
I mean, I get it for you, but...
That's why this works. Same taste in alcohol, different taste in men.
No, also, we don't have the same taste in alcohol.
What am I drinking right now?
Well, you're drinking bourbon because it's what I was drinking, but you prefer Campari, you weirdo.
I don't prefer Campari. I like Campari right now. Campari is delicious. Tweet us and let us know.
If you prefer Campari or bourbon?
Well, no, because then you're going to win. Let us know just in general if you like Campari.
What is your favorite alcohol?
No, because my favorite's vodka and you like vodka. I know that. But don't break the premise.
Okay, fine.
But no, we're never going to fight over a man.
Men, though.
When have we ever?
Had the same taste in men?
Yeah, well, I mean, we tend to think, I think Tom Hiddleston is attractive. I'm just saying, for me, there's no reality where I'm picking that over Charlie Hunnam.
Charlie Hunnam in this movie?
Do I need the King Arthur pictures?
Well, sure, I would choose King Arthur or Charlie Hunnam and King Arthur over Thomas Hiddleston Sharp. In this movie.
No, in this movie too, he's got the swoopy blonde hair, of course.
No, he's terrible. Dr. Alan McMichael is
How is he terrible?
Ugh. Okay. I have a fundamental problem with Charlie Hunnam's American accent. Because I
don't have an ear for accents.
It's bad. It's really bad. It's bad.
I don't know.
He also has such a strange cadence where, like, when he says 2-syllable names, it's never right. Because that was one of my pet peeves when we were watching Sons of Anarchy. Because his wife's name on that show was Tara, and he would always call her Tara. It was like, it ended up being like 3 syllables, and he does the same thing with Edith, where he's like, he enunciates the first syllable too hard, and I can't take him seriously. And I've literally never seen a movie where he uses his real accent.
Oh, you're right, now I don't think he's hot.
It just pulls me out of everything he's in. I can't take it seriously.
I'll pull him out of everything he's in.
I mean, I knew what I was walking into with that statement, so you're welcome.
But no, I don't know. So we were talking about the house.
Yes.
Were we? I got what I asked for. Okay. Happy October, everybody. How's your Halloween going? Apparently, I'm stoked. Target is going to have, like, aquatic themed Halloween decorations, and one of the things they're going to have is mermaid skeletons.
That's fun.
Like, I'm not going to get 3.
I know, right? That sounds awesome.
So, I hope I didn't make that up. Let me know, because you'll know you're in the future and I'm not right now. So, that's how podcasts work, right?
Sort of. So,
this house is stunning. This is something that they don't often do. It still does happen, but it's like a bygone era of Hollywood where they built like whole sets, because they built the whole house. It's not even like a series of rooms that are stacked next to each other on a stage.
No, it's not like the sets on Friends. It's legit.
They and they didn't find a house. It's like a giant, like 3. It's 3 or 4. It might even be 4 stories. To tell you the truth, I think it's 3-story. Like dollhouse, basically, inside of
3 stories in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Inside of a soundstage, and the whole thing is there. And they like designed it so that it can't, like, walls can be pulled away and like parts of it can be moved for the crew and stuff. And it kaleidoscopes. It's like one of those what are they called? The telescope houses.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, and some of this you know, but I'm telling you for the audience sake, but the like vestibule, which I never get the chance to use that word outside of Friends.
I'm stuck in an ATM vestibule with Jill Goodacre.
The vestibule is smaller than the foyer, and the foyer is smaller than the library, which boldly repurposed from Derek's loft on Teen Wolf.
It does look quite a lot like that.
It was not, but I couldn't resist making that joke. So, yeah, and it's like, it's just, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, for me, the movie's worth it for the set and the wardrobe alone.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was I'm gonna agree with you and still somehow probably turn this into a disagreement. But I think the house is one of the most impressive parts of this movie, along with the costuming. However, I don't think that's the only reason it's worth it, but I do agree with you that it's like an old Hollywood thing, because you're right, that does not happen anymore, where you build an entire, like the entire main set where it's built from scratch, it's not using anything else, and it's like just for this one thing, and it got torn down the next day. Like, that's insane.
That we know.
Yeah, that's literally insane. Like, that is some Dracula, like Bram Stoker's Dracula level shit. And I really think it's that level of practicality on this movie that makes it something that's worth something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it worth something more than what people think it is.
It has a very, like, crafted, like, it feels like crafted.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's so amazing, is that, like, everything in the house was built for the house. There is nothing that was, like, sourced from somewhere else. Like, they built everything.
It was also a fully functioning kitchen.
Insane.
To the point where Jessica Chastain, like, had to try to not burn herself. Like, she had to remember to pick up the towel when she got the tea kettle and stuff.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's crazy.
And it, like, another thing that I didn't realize about it that was really fascinating, because it's like, they mentioned the word medieval a few times, and I was like, that's too long ago. And then when I realized that, I was like, this is 200 years ago. So, you know, medieval isn't quite that far, but it's like, it was like a, not ancient, but an extremely old house, where they're like, parts of the house are Gothic, like proper Gothic, not like 1700s Gothic. And like all the way down to the cellar, like the cellar had its design roots in like Roman architecture of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it looks kind of like an aqueduct.
Yeah, and so they were like, it was intentionally like the house had been built upon and built upon and built upon. And actually, that's another one of my biggest complaint in the entire movie, is I don't know how anybody allowed the movie to end without the house collapsing in on itself.
I mean,
it should have sunken into the earth.
I feel like it wasn't ready to collapse in with the weight of its ghosts yet.
Oh, you think it needed more ghosts?
I just feel like it wasn't ready. I feel like maybe...
Do you want a Crimson Peak sequel that takes place in 1960?
Oh my god, totally. Totally. I also feel like maybe if Edith had died, then yes. But Edith made it out. And
I
so
forgot he did too.
He does not make it out.
Yeah. Charlie Hunnam.
Charlie Hunnam is not him.
He is to me.
Christ almighty. Fine, yes. Charlie Hunnam makes it out. Himself. Unbelievable. No.
Although, pour one out a little bit. Pour a little bit out for the doggy.
Yeah, poor doggy. Lucille.
Do you think that was necessary?
Yes.
You do?
What is our fucking Edith and Alan McMichael gonna take that dog back to America?
Sure.
That Italian dog back to America?
Oh yeah, you're right. It won't know how to sit. They'll need to learn the commands in Italian.
If only I knew the word for sit in Italian right now. Where is Karen when I need her?
I know. Follow along. Andiamo! Yeah, no, I don't know. I'm fine with it, especially because it's I think the movie... We talk a lot about this, and I'm shocked at how frequently I am pro killing the dog. I would have thought it would have been the other way around. Well, but I think it's an element of cruelty that the movie needs at that point.
I think we watch movies where it's necessary at the moment that it's necessary. And in this movie, we know that Edith is cold. We know that Lucille is cold. But up until that moment, we don't know the depths of her cruelty. And in that moment, when she kills the dog, after she's already stabbed Alan, and she's like trying,
armpit.
and she put,
Oh no, the armpit one's later. She does that to Thomas. I forgot about that one.
No,
and that one took me.
She stabs Alan in the armpit, and then Thomas stabs him in the middle.
Right.
Because he can tell him where to do it because he's a doctor. But she's already pushed. She's cut Lucille in the face, or cut Edith in the face, pushed her off the ledge, and stabbed Alan in the whatever artery is in your armpit. And yeah, exactly. And she then kills the dog. And I think it's necessary to prove how far she's gone in that moment, because she's just crazy up until that moment. And then you realize that she's like legitimately homicidal.
One is also calculated,
Exactly.
because the dog wasn't doing anything but barking. And I do love how Lucille... unhinge is not the word that I want, because she does it with like a calmness, but I do love her kind of like the jig is up shrug emoji.
Yeah.
Like when Edith walks in on them, she has this like, I might as well do this.
Yeah. Well, she's like, I might as well like give Thomas a handy to completion before I deal with you.
And I just, because I love all the way like to the end when like Edith and her are fighting out in the snow, and she's like, I'm not going to stop until one of us is dead.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a level of like crazy putty that I admire.
Well, it's like crazy putty commitment that like I can't aspire to. Like I would give up so easy.
And it gets so like carnally vicious. Like
it's
the way
visceral.
the two women are going at it.
Yeah.
Because I always
with
forget
blades.
about
with blades.
Yeah, I always forget about how when Lucille is holding the elevator and Edith like slices, like almost cuts her fingers off.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And it's just, you're just like, oh God. Like, and
and that I think is the Guillermo del Toro shining through, because he's like a horror master before he's anything.
But it's in a way that's so exhilarating, because it's like when you hit those fight or flight moments, it's like Edith is not, an accomplished, quote unquote, she's not like a final girl in the way you would. I mean, I guess she's a final girl in the classic sense, but she's not like a strong
she's not
female.
A fighter, though.
Yeah, but she gets scrappy.
Yeah, she's not a fighter by nature, which is what I would argue Lucille is. But Edith is willing to kill for her life.
Lucille isn't a fighter; she's an adapter.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and you can see Lucille kind of like not wanting to do, or Edith rather, not wanting to do the things she's doing, but doing them anyways.
100%.
It's probably up there in my favorite, like, costumes in cinema history, like iconic costumes in cinema history. Lucille's nightgown with the house coat
in the
at
climax,
the end.
Yeah.
And she had 3 different house coats with 3 different lengths of train that they switched out depending on how dramatic they wanted the shot to be.
Interesting.
Because, I mean, when she's running down the stairs, like, that's not what she's in the elevator with.
Oh, yeah, no, I think, and that could bring us to the costumes, to be honest, because I think the costumes are one of the most impressive parts of this movie.
It's I realize I started this in a very, like, bold, I don't think this movie's that great. And I do like it. I think you're at a 10 and I'm at like a 7.5. But for me, this movie is 30% costumes, 30% set, and then, or I guess 40, and then 20% story and acting.
That's fair. I mean, I don't disagree with that assessment. It's just that the story does more for me.
That's fine.
Even as thin as it is, it does more for me than it does for you. And that's not to say that the costumes and set don't do as much for me as they do for you, but the story does more.
Mm-hmm. So was there anything specifically about the costumes you wanted to mention, or? I
mean, all of it. In the first place, this is as far back in history as I would go if I could be guaranteed I was rich. Because Victorian fashion is like my hashtag aesthetic. For sure.
This is Victorian, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also didn't know, because the stuff with Buffalo and the electricity and all that, apparently at this time in this time period, Buffalo was the most electrical city in the world.
I think that sort of ties into the prestige, because Nikola Tesla was doing his experiments in upstate New York, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they put Edith in mostly yellows and golds, and one of the things they compared her to was a canary in a coal mine.
And a butterfly, too.
Yeah. She's a butterfly and Lucille's a moth. And they wanted Lucille and Thomas to be like ink in this very sunny world of America. They wanted them to like slink through. And then both of them, but even more so Lucille, when they get to Crimson Peak, the coloring and the texture of the fabrics and stuff are designed purposefully to make Lucille blend into the house.
Yeah, I think it does the same for Thomas to an extent, except for that men wore black a lot more often, but his palette, I think, expands in Crimson Peak, because he's wearing greens and blues sometimes, where he only ever wears black in America. I don't know. I think Thomas is to me, and I think part of it is because I do like Tom Hiddleston and I'm aware of the amount of research and stuff that he put into it, but Sir Thomas is, I think, the interesting character in this because he is the one who's caught in between these two women and trying to serve them both in a way that also serves himself, and he ends up realizing he can't do that. But I think what's so interesting to me about him is that he does come down on the side of Edith after having been so long under the thumb of Lucille.
Oh, no, you're right. Oh my god.
Bless you. Question mark?
Got that. Oh my god. I just played myself. Okay. Continue what you were saying?
I think what's so interesting about Sir Thomas is how he's caught in between Lucille and Edith, but he eventually comes down on the side of Edith, even though he's been under the thumb of Lucille for as long as he has been, for basically his whole life. He's been subjugated by Lucille, and that's what I think is so romantic about the movie, is that I think he truly finds himself with Edith in a way that he didn't realize he could before.
Oh, absolutely. I always thought that's why his ghost was slightly different.
Well, he also wasn't buried in the mud.
True.
The red ooze.
The clay.
Yeah.
I do love his ghost. His ghost is my favorite one.
His ghost is so good.
And as, like, awful as it is, I do love her stabbing him in the face. It's so, like, iconic.
It's grotesque, but it's amazing.
It is, but...
Yeah, it's amazing.
And, yeah.
Well, it speaks to how broken she has turned out to be. That, like, she can't see reason in that moment. Or any time before, but she can't see reason in that moment where it's been clear to her for a while prior to that he is legitimately in love with Edith. And she can't fathom a world where she's not the center of his universe. And so I think it breaks her in a new and different way for him to admit that he loves Edith the way that he does, because I believe him at the end. Like, I believe that he falls in love with Edith and he doesn't want to harm her and he doesn't want to kill her like they've done to the ones previous. He's like, why can't we just make this work? Like, it'll be fine. And on the one hand, I'm like, it'll totally be fine. And on the other hand, I am a little on Lucille's side where it's like, so you're just gonna remove the most important relationship I've ever had in my life because you found a piece of ass? Like, both sides make sense to me in that moment. And I think that Lucille responds the only way she knows how to, which is with violence, because it's the only thing she's ever been met with, besides from Thomas. It's wild. I see, this movie's deeper than you think it is.
I mean, yeah, a lot of it I think is... It feels apparent when you're watching it. It's kind of like, well, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I said feels. You've shown your work. And again,
I agree with you.
I like this movie. I'm not arguing that it's bad.
I feel the need to try to sell you on it, even though I know you like it, because we saw this in the theater together, and I know that we all really liked it, but I feel... This is one of those movies I feel very protective of, because I know that people didn't respond to it the way it was meant to be absorbed because of the way it was advertised. And so people went looking for a scary ghost story, and that's not what they got. And I think that does the movie a disservice, because it's exactly right for what it is. And if you go into it thinking it's terrifying, you're going to be disappointed. But if you go in looking for a gothic romance, I think you're going to be so satisfied.
Absolutely. I wanted to say this. I wrote it down. It was from Guillermo del Toro. But he said, in horror, the haunted mansion is sentient and evil. He said, in gothic romance, it's a manifestation of the character's psyches and or moral decay. It is full of their demons or angels.
Interesting. I agree with that. I mean, because I think I don't remember it's been so long since I read or watched Wuthering Heights, but the name of their like estate or whatever is very similar. Maybe it is Wuthering Heights. LOL. But it also, with regards to Jane Eyre, it's like the Holmes feel like a character in the books and in the movies. Like they're presented in such a way that it does feel similar to this, where they're living and breathing.
Or
and
like
it's
Hill House.
Or like Hill House, exactly. That's a really good comparison, because it's moments like that where I feel the most kindred to Guillermo del Toro, because while I think he is a literal genius and I'm just like a movie lover, I can see the moments where he has had inspiration from properties that came before him. And it's in a way where it's paying homage, but it's not ripping off.
That is quite, I'm not saying this in a like a duh way, but I'm saying that's quite literally how genius works. I mean,
well, totally, 100%. And I just feel like that is why I like him so much. Even having not seen his earlier stuff, I think that's why he's so great, because when I watch a Guillermo del Toro movie, I can feel so much about him as a person, and I can feel a lot about him as a movie fan, and I can feel his joy at getting to do this, even if it's a dark thing. Like, Crimson Peak is dark, and Pan's Labyrinth is dark, but I can feel the happiness that it brings him to make these dark things. And I think that's what's so great about him, because it's not like the Snyderverse, where it's like dark for the sake of darkness. It's like this darkness, to bring it back around to your point at the beginning, the darkness that Guillermo del Toro makes is in order to make that 12-year-old kid feel joy. And that's what's perfect to me.
Okay, well, I think that's good. Did you have anything else that you wanted to comment on?
I mean, I'm sure I do, but this episode would easily go 5 hours if we just like went shot for shot through this movie. So, no, not at present.
I meant to mention this earlier, but that the sets have ceilings, and that's not very common in.
I loved that in the commentary where he said the ceilings were meant to look like the like inside of the lid of a jewel box. Because, and he said something very similar, that he said most production designers and directors don't want to look at ceilings, but these ones really did. And so the PAs basically were like making these elaborate ceilings in this fully built house, which I think is incredible. The attention to detail, I guess, that Guillermo del Toro puts into stuff, because we talked about that a little with The Shape of Water. Because even though I've never been to 1960s Baltimore, I could pinpoint that was 1960s Baltimore in a way that, like, this is very clearly Victorian England and America, and Pan's Labyrinth is very, like wartime Spain. Like, he's very, very particular, and the things that he envisions for these movies that he makes are so specific that we were looking at the stuff where I said I would love to spend like 5 minutes in his brain. And you looked at me like I was crazy, and you were like, that sounds horrifying.
Yeah, I stand by what I said.
I just think he's got such an eye for detail. I think it would be fascinating.
Horrifically terrifying detail.
Not
Have
always.
you seen The Cell?
Yes, that's Tarsem.
I don't want to be stuck in Del Toro-verse.
I don't want to get stuck there. I said 5 minutes.
Okay. Is that it? Do you want to?
Well, yeah, I feel like that was a bad note to end on.
I mean, we're at an hour, so I don't know how much.
Okay, well, I guess happy Halloween month. Happy 1st of October. And then let us know what you think about Crimson Peak if you've seen it. Was it streaming somewhere?
I can look. Hold on. I think
I watched your DVD.
It doesn't look like it's streaming anywhere for free, but you can rent it from plenty of places.
Sweet. So go rent Crimson Peak anywhere that you can find it, because I think it sets a good tone for October. It's definitely a fall and winter time movie. And then, as always, you can follow us on Twitter @SoI'mWatching, Instagram @SoI'mWatchingTheShow. We're also on Facebook and Tumblr, so I'm watching the show. There's no music to speak of, right?
Mm-mm.
Just the score. I guess you could do Red Right Hand in the Spotify playlist.
Is that a song?
Yeah, it was in the trailer.
Oh, okay.
But other than that, you can just rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes or YouTube or Spotify or wherever you listen. And that's it for us.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.